The duty of loyalty and obedience does not extend to disclosure of material facts. The licensee must disclose the information. The licensee may want to terminate the agency relationship with the seller if they insist on refusing to disclose material information. Skill, care, and diligence. An agent has a duty to the principal or client to possess the knowledge and skill necessary to effectively represent the client. In other words, a licensee must be competent at their job. The first step in becoming competent is to acquire the skills necessary to effectively perform the job of a real estate licensee. The required skills will be different depending on the type of business in which the licensee participates. For example, a licensee wanting to become a commercial real estate agent needs different skills than a licensee wanting to specialize in residential real estate. The skills necessary to effectively represent a client are not necessarily acquired in a pre-licensing course. If a licensee wants to represent sellers through listing agreements, the licensee should be able to offer sound pricing advice to the seller. This requires a knowledge of the subject property's market. The listing agent should also understand the listing agreement so that they are able to answer any questions the seller may have. The listing agent should also be able to analyze offers received from potential buyers or their brokers, allowing them to point out strengths and weaknesses. The listing agent should also know how to effectively market a property for sale. This discussion is not meant to offer a checklist for the skills necessary to become a successful listing agent. Rather, this discussion is meant to illustrate the type of skills a licensee must possess in order to meet the duty of skill, care, and diligence. Once the licensee possesses the skills necessary to exercise skill, care, and diligence, the licensee must use the skills. Some licensees possess the requisite skills to effectively represent a client, but for various reasons fail to use them. A licensee may be too busy to spend the time to explain a complicated contract to a client. A licensee may forget to renew a certain part of a contract to ensure their client is protected. If a licensee fails to exercise due care and diligence, they may be guilty of negligence. If a licensee is guilty of negligence, they may be liable for the damages suffered by the client as a result of their negligence. If a licensee is uncomfortable with the competence level of a certain transaction, they should seek assistance from someone with the required knowledge or decline to represent the client. For example, many commercial transactions may be very complicated. Many residential agents do not have the skills necessary to meet the duty of skill, care, and diligence on a commercial transaction. If such an agent is asked to represent a client on a commercial transaction, they should either seek assistance or decline the representation. The converse is true as well. Many commercial real estate agents have never completed a residential purchase contract or taken a residential listing. A licensee who has focused on commercial transactions may not possess the requisite competency level. We compare commercial and residential merely as examples. This is not the only situation in which a licensee may not have the skills necessary to represent a client. A licensee may not know the market in the area a client would like to buy, or they may not know much about property management. Licensees must be realistic with themselves regarding their skill levels. A licensee should never let the lure of commission convince them to participate in a transaction for which they are not qualified. Additionally, licensees should be diligent in applying their skills in an effort to effectively represent their client. Disclosure or non-disclosure of information. Confidentiality. A licensee is obligated to disclose all information they have which may affect a client's position in a transaction. This is true whether the information will harm or benefit the client. A licensee is required to discover certain facts regarding a transaction. For example, an agent should be able to identify issues relating to a property which a reasonable person would be able to identify. A listing agent is responsible to present all offers unless otherwise instructed. Some information may not fall under a licensee's obligation to discover, but if the information is discovered, it must be disclosed nevertheless. If a listing agent overhears a buyer's agent remarking that their buyer would be willing to go higher on the sales price, the listing agent must disclose the information to the seller. If a buyer agent discovers that a seller would be willing to go lower on a sales price, the agent must disclose the information. If the buyer's agent discovers that the seller is in financial trouble and therefore is extremely motivated to sell, the agent must disclose the information to the buyer.